Good afternoon, everybody. My name's Adriana Galimberti-Rennie. The reason that you're on this call, I believe, is because you saw an advert about a free online 30 minutes of tips on how to help your employees who are going through some incredible times at this moment. Welcome, all of you. And I just wanted to say something about myself and also about the fact that you have chosen to spend the next half an hour with me, with all of us, so that you clearly see that there is a need that your employees could do with being supported with. And I think, to be fair, we all understand that. The issue here is, how do you get something as right as you possibly can? And the answer is to suck it and see, because every single employee is going to be different. Their reactions to things are going to be different. But the point about what I'm offering you today is that it's a bird's eye view from a whole mass of employees that I have already been speaking with individually in the quiet of their homes. So I'm getting a sense of the many different ways in which people are beginning to react. If you have, for example, employees in their 20s up to their mid to late 30s, you're going to find a particular scope of reactions. Now, I'm not saying that everybody's falling into this, but I want you to be alert to the fact that, these young people are more used to being socially active with each other. And in some ways, this lockdown is something that is completely strange to them. Yeah, they're on social media, they're doing that anyway. But in reality, they're the ones that are generally out at the pubs, they're out at the gym, they're out spinning, they're out cycling, they are doing stuff with their mates. And of course, they can't even do any of that. It might even be arguable, but for some of them, they can't even do it on their own. The idea of going out for a cycle, for example, that might be fine if you are clearly near to where you live, but as we know only too well, you can't go to any of the national parks. And most cyclists don't like cycling along main roads. So, there are adaptations that they're having to create. And also they need to adapt to this new virtual world. They may well have been working 1 or 2 days a week from home, but the shift between doing that for 1 or 2 days a week and doing it 5 days a week and actually being quite limited in terms of what they can do outside of their home space is completely different. And that's true for all ages. It's as true if you have grandparents or elderly parents. It's as true for them as it is for the 20 or 30-year-olds and, of course, the teenagers. So you as managers are sitting with a double whammy. You will have your own families, you will have your own close friends, and whatever is going on there, of course, you're connected with. On top of that, you have a certain level of responsibility that, of course, you've always had for the well-being of your employees. The reason that now comes to the fore is because however many months into the future we are looking, and I'm purposefully not putting a time frame on this, the reality is this is the new normal. Yeah, until it changes, this is what it is. So how are you going to manage their motivation, your employees' motivation? How are you going to help them to keep their emotional well-being going? Because we know that when that is under stress, then productivity is under stress, concentration is under stress, creativity is under stress. This actually could be an opportunity to look at to begin to fill all the holes in the sieve that we call our working life. To really review what's going on and see what we want to take into this new time when we all come out of lockdown. And actually also see where we are hindering ourselves. So, practically speaking, I already have had, in the last 2 weeks, I can give you examples of people setting up at home, being too busy, being quite stressed, but actually having something to do. We're now getting to the point where homes are set up as work environments, and for some people, it's going to be 1.3 or 1.5 meters squared that they're looking at. The same for walls, always. And some of them may not have a room that they can just literally close the door on. And if they don't, then there's something about how you help them to manage the space, to identify a space where they go to work. And if it's in their sitting room, then is it a little corner? What does it look out onto? What can they do to make it more like a work environment? It might be taking some pictures off the wall. It might be putting a planner up, whatever it is. So that ergonomically they have this sense of, when I sit at that chair at that time, I'm starting to work. But even before that, how do they get into work? Because if you think about it, if you're a home worker, you get up out of bed in the morning. Are you going to wear the same clothes that you would normally wear to go to work? And I would suggest yes. It's really important to be able to mark out the difference between your working day and your home day. And if we can keep those boundaries to some extent, then that is going to help people feel ready to work. These are all props. We're looking at props. So again, you might think to yourself, well, should I say that? And absolutely you should say it. And absolutely it needs to come from you as, this is how I want my staff team to actually be functioning. So getting up in the morning, starting now, I don't want to be too prescriptive about this, because of course those people who are night owls might be better starting off at 11 o'clock in the morning and working through until 6, and you get the most, or 5, and you get the most out of them that you would get anyway. Those people who are larks might actually prefer to be starting around about 7:30 or 8 o'clock. So there's some flexibility that you can give them here, and that's really important. One thing I think is absolutely essential as a reinforcer of we are starting our working week are the Monday morning meetings. Now, I'm sure for many of you, you will have already offered these. It's something that you do in your normal week, or maybe you do it once a month or whatever. It is more important now than at any time before. And the reason for that is because it's about structure. If you can help people to get a sense of structure in their working day, they're not coming into an office, they're not going to wherever they would normally go to, they are staying at home. So if they have to wear their work clothes or wear something that would be appropriate for work at home, if they need to all start the week at 9:30 together as a team, looking at the tasks that you would hope they would be able to fulfill in that week, then everybody's starting together. It helps to get people who are maybe concerned about how they're going to focus on their work. This is a really good way of starting. Only needs to be 20 minutes, half an hour. But, and I have heard managers being told, yeah, have your team meetings, but actually do them on audio. I'm actually going to completely disagree with that point of view for one reason. You as a manager, when you see an employee of yours, within 10 or 15 seconds, you know how they are. You get a sense of how they are. If they're on audio, it's much harder for you to really get that, because people hide behind their voices sometimes. Or somebody just goes quiet and you don't know what's going on for them, really. So you miss all of those physical clues that you get when you're on an audio-visual setup. My view is that at least once a week, when you're checking in with your colleagues, with your employees, that actually you do it in an audio-visual way. The other thing to consider is the end of the week. So we bookend it. We start at the beginning with a task focused. Hi, how did your weekend go? What are your plans for this week? What are we going to achieve as a team? So it's all about teams. And then at the end of the week, it's about celebration. Yeah? So, for example, let me give you an example. Round about 7 o'clock every night, where I'm currently living, you hear people clapping. They're clapping up and down the valley. And they're yelling. And actually, when you hear it, it's very, very moving. Because when I first heard it, I thought, oh, what's that about? And then I realised it was actually, we've survived another day. And we're all together. And it was very, very powerful when I got that, what that was really about, celebrating. We're coming to the end of a day and we're all together. Now, you can probably see it was very powerful when I realised that. And so I want to pass that on to you, because there's something about the need to find reasons to celebrate. You cannot find too small a reason to celebrate, because this is about how you build resilience. Yeah? So you bookend the Monday morning task with the Friday afternoon celebration. And of course, when you get to your Friday afternoon, you will be picking up those people who really are, maybe if they live on their own completely, they may well be quite scared of the weekend. Yeah? And how do you deal with that? Because, for example, I was speaking with a manager who lives on his own, and we had been looking at managing his working week. And it was only last Thursday. And as we went off, just in the seconds before we actually hit the button to close our meeting, I saw a look of absolute terror across that man's face. Now, I happen to know that he lives on his own. There's a lot going on for him. He's very physically orientated, so exercise is really, really important to him. And of course, there are only certain things that you can actually do to distract yourself. And I had not really taken the measure of how important our meetings had become until I saw that look of terror. And that's why, that's a really good reason why I want you, I think it's so important for you to really consider visual meetings, group meetings, but visual ones. And then maybe you can pick up with somebody who you might just not be sure about later on, or the next day, or whatever. Yeah? And how do you pick up? Well, actually, even terror is pretty normal. And when you are trying to look at the positives, it's very easy to miss. And yet, when people are given the option, the opportunity to speak about a little bit of what's going on for them, it's almost like a pressure cooker. You know, the steam that rises out of the pressure cooker as everything's boiling underneath and you can't see what's inside, but you get the steam coming out. Well, this is the releasing of the pressure. And that's exactly what your job is now. And of course, if you have an EAP, if your organization has an EAP, or, you know, you have some additional provision, then absolutely get them to use it. Quite often, you're going to find that an employee that you're suggesting uses it might well be quite resistant. Because everybody's going through this, so they should be able to cope. Well, actually, none of us are coping particularly well, and we won't be as time goes on. So it's just a luck of the draw. But it might also be other things. It might also be that there are situations that come about from being isolated or from feeling isolated that actually normally we'd be able to distract ourselves from. And mental health is going to be the way in which we manage people's physical health. It's also going to be the way in which we get a sense of people not just being present, but actually being able to function. So, one of the things that I'm doing is I'm offering these free meetings. This is now the second one, as some of you are already alert to. I'm offering you the opportunity to have a bit of a taster of what we're talking about. Not just the practical things. In a moment, I'm going to go into what goes on, fear that goes on in people's minds and how we deal with that. But these are the sorts of things that I'm going to talk about on a regular weekly basis, half an hour a week, on an ongoing basis after Easter. And it's specifically for managers, but in reality, it'll do you as an individual some good because you'll understand what's going on. It will help you manage things at home with either parents, elderly parents, or young children. I mean, this is so difficult at the moment because how do young children who would normally see their elderly parents and their parents can't, their grandparents can't touch them, and they don't get it. And even at 4 or 5, they don't get, well, if you're at home, then this is playtime, surely. How on earth are you going to manage all of that? Well, that's the same for you and your family as it is for your employees. And so we can look at those sorts of things, the sort of way in which you don't just practically structure things, but also the way in which you find distance, because all of us need our alone time. Now, those of you out there who are more, if you understand what I mean by introverts and extroverts, if you're more introvert, actually this is going to be slightly easier for you. If, on the other hand, as quite a number of entrepreneurs particularly can be, if there's the more extrovert side of you coming out, then actually there are things that we need to do to rein back in, to create some structure. And this is going to be specific. It's specific, however, there's going to be enough information there for each one of you to take something out of it and either use it with a colleague or use it for yourselves or use it for your employees, your children, whatever. So that's the value of this. It's about making sure that your mental well-being is as good as it can be. And it can be good because this is all an attitude of mind. Yeah. This week alone, I have been, though I'm working online, I have been privy to somebody whose childhood friend died of this virus and somebody who is just recovering from the virus. And that's in 1 week. This is going to be the norm somehow. So you are going to be picking that up with your employees. And you're going to have to deal with what they mean by fear. Now, what I mean by fear is I see fear as something that actually, yes, we are in an absolutely real situation. Fear, however, is the very thing that's going to stop us from taking the best out of it. It's actually going to stop so many people in their businesses. Fear stops us. It's a stopping point. There is a way in which you can actually go beyond your fear, but it's a mental thing. It requires some real understanding of what happens in the brain. So now I'm going to tell you about a little bit about what does happen in the brain. Though clearly, if we were to work together on a regular basis, we'd be going back to this with, greater insight. One employee I was working with recently turned around and said about the situation 2 weeks ago, just before the lockdown. He turned around and said, everybody is panic buying. If I had not actually been working with you, I probably would have been doing the same. But what I can see through the work that we have done is that their response is a fear response. And I thought, yes. Because once you can understand it, you can stand back from it slightly. It doesn't mean to say you're not going to feel it, but you can choose to decide not to be overwhelmed by it. And I have been in physical situations where I have been physically at risk, and I have seen what I would call a herd of people doing what they've been told to do, and yet I actually made a completely different decision because it didn't make sense to me. Now, that particular situation led to a whole load of people being down in a tube station and me finding my way out of a tube station, admittedly not knowing where I was going, but knowing that being down in the tube station was, given the situation, not the best place to be. And I walked out and I was fine. And these decisions we have to make. But the only way in which we're going to make those decisions is if we can use what we call the prefrontal cortex. Now, the prefrontal cortex is the part of our brain that actually makes complex decisions. But, the interesting thing is that we've got another part of the brain. It takes us 25 years to develop this part of the brain. There's another part, the most the most safe, the part that is most protected, called the amygdala. And that we're born with. And that's all about emotions. It's about keeping us safe. The amygdala is not interested in our happiness. It is interested in our existence, our safety. It will do whatever it needs to do to keep us safe, including, if we're afraid, freezing. But that might not be the best bet. And in these situations today, there's a lot of amygdalas running about the place. That's what the panic buying has been about. That's why we have had a lot of supposedly irrational behaviour going on. Yeah? That's also why the youngsters are walking around being really quite antisocial and, coughing on people and whatever. It's another response from the amygdala. Yeah. It's not the best response by any means, but it is their response. What we need to do is we need to quieten the amygdala. And there are ways that I can show you to do that, and they're very simple. They're simple, but they need practice. And they're things that you can actually share with your employees as well. You can do it yourself. You can share it with your family. You can share it with your friends. And of course, you share it with your employees, because that's another way of building resilience. So in these series of half-hour meetings that I'm looking to run, that people can join on Zoom from Easter, after Easter, the first Friday after Easter, they will actually be paid for meetings a month in advance, and we're looking at charging £200 for each month. So if you don't, you pay for a month in advance, but you may not want to stay for 6 months, or you may not want to stay for 3 months. We do have different packages. So effectively, the £200 is for 6 months. So if you pay up for 6 months, you will get the £200 rate. Otherwise, the normal rate will be £260 per month, and then you pay it as you're going along. So there is benefit in paying it in one lump sum. Or we can do other things whereby you pay it once every 2 months, depending upon what your cash flow situation is. The value to this for you and your organisation is that what we're creating here is resilience at a time when actually most people don't even know how to do it. So the competitive advantage that you're going to actually end up with is a more loyal team. A team, full stop. If you end up with situations where people in your team are either affected directly or indirectly in terms of their families or their friends, then actually that team needs to cohere. You cannot have people so frightened that they dissolve themselves away and stop functioning as a team. Yeah? So there are immediate benefits to structuring your team and ensuring that there is structure in the team, even though they're working remotely. You have the ongoing benefits of ensuring that you're picking up if there's an issue and nipping it in the bud, or getting them to the right support. You also have the longer term benefits that actually those of your team are able to pick up the ball and really run with it. Now, those people who are already in work are feeling hugely grateful. Yeah, I know, because I'm hearing it. they will be surrounded by people who maybe are about to lose their jobs, have already lost their jobs, will lose their jobs in 2 or 3 months. And I know that the UK government have put lots of things into place, but that is also going to be another anxiety provoker. So again, when you have the resources to talk about it, to deal with it, this is exactly what's going to happen, that you are actually going to help them to reduce their anxiety by understanding what's going on for them. In doing it for them, you do it for yourself, so that reinforces and re-resources you. It gives you a skill set for the future. You know, one of my clients said to me, if your conversations don't start with, when I was in the war, you don't know how to deal with this. That made me think. Because actually there have been plenty of people who've been through wars. It doesn't have to be the Second World War. There have been plenty of wars. We actually have plenty of resources to understand how trauma affects the brain, and also to help us to identify trauma. You know, at this moment in time, there's an awful lot of loss that is being processed. There's the loss of security. You know, we all got up a month ago expecting somehow that, you know, we were going to be carrying on with our lives as they are. We get up these mornings and we know we can't be so assured. We just don't know. And as creatures, as animals, knowing is a pretty important part of our armor. So I want you to think about how you and your business is armored through its people, but not armored in a defensive way, actually armored in a very creative way, because it's going to need creativity and flexibility, mental agility to get you from where we are today to where we need to be. Maybe in 6 months, maybe in 12 months, maybe in 18 months. Whenever that is, you need to be ready for it. I hope that some of the examples that I've given you today, the very practical ones, I hope you can take them and actually use them, apply them. Maybe apply them on yourselves first, your families first. See how different people react in different ways, just to information. Yeah. And then if you would like to join me, I have another meeting running this Friday. That will be at 11:30, and you're more than welcome to join me for that. That's another free meeting where we will talk about how to deal with a really difficult situation of keeping your team together when somebody is actually off ill. Because again, it's fear. Yeah? And how do you create a situation where people, yes, they acknowledge what's going on, but in reality, they also find a way to focus. And the focus might be little and often, but it's really important that they do that focus. Okay. It's important for them because that's what builds control. Thank you for taking the time today. Normally in our meetings, when we go forward, everybody will have an opportunity. They are going to be audio meetings so that we keep the confidentiality of those members in the group. I know that you come from different organisations, so that is going to be important for some people rather than others. But there'll be time for questions and answers, and that's the point, that's the key thing, that when you have the time for questions and answers, you can bring the thing that the situation that you want most addressing. And even if that situation doesn't, if you hear something that doesn't relate to you at this moment in time, what you're doing is you're investing in knowledge so that actually when it does come up, you've already got it there. Okay, all right. I hope to hear some of you back in our meeting the first Friday after the Easter break. Thank you. Bye-bye.